Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Blue Fire. Blue Fire is a 3D action platformer where you play as a little dude with a cracked mask and two swords on his back. The movement in this 3D world feels actually pretty good, pretty tight. This is going to vary from person to person, but I am quite the aficionado of platformers, and I didn't mind the control scheme of this little dude in Blue Fire. As far as controls go, it kind of reminded me of Hat Girl from A Hat in Time, where you at least start out with a jump and a dash. Although I think I like Blue Fire's dash a little better than a Hat Girl and A Hat in Time's dash, where it is a little more controllable, and I just feel like I could control how far he went with the dash and when to stop in midair. I don't know, just overall, I think I prefer the control scheme in this game. And there's definitely a lot more emphasis on platforming in this game compared to combat, which you wouldn't think so just based off like the character design and the world that he resides in with these enemies. But I just felt like the majority of challenges from this game came from platforming itself, not the combat. Even the boss fights themselves felt a little easy in my opinion compared to some of the more platformy challenges. And the combat itself is pretty simplistic. Basically, you have a targeting system similar to like an old school 3D Zelda game where you just lock onto an enemy and then you just mash that attack button over and over again. There is aerial combat as well because this is like a 3D platformer, so it might be in your best interest to like hop into the air and keep on hitting the enemy in the air. But yeah, that's basically what you're going to be doing. You do unlock a offensive spell that you can like charge up and then release, and it does this quick little attack, but especially in the end of the game, it doesn't do that much damage. There's a shield, and if you time it correctly, you can parry the enemy's attack, but I felt like the combat itself was pretty mindless because I could just hit that attack button over and over again, and I just really didn't worry about dodging enemies' attacks or anything like that. I just felt like I could eat the attacks and be able to heal pretty sufficiently. They are generous with these healing potion-like essence things that you can use. And so I didn't really worry about avoiding attacks or anything like that. I could just attack until the enemy was defeated. Right off the bat, at the beginning of this game, I picked up on major Hollow Knight vibes, and I would be very surprised to hear that if this game was not inspired by Hollow Knight. It's similar where at first it just plops you in the middle of this world. It's basically like this castle floating in the sky. It's actually a pretty cool aesthetic, and this whole world takes place in this floating castle. And it gives you little to no instruction at the beginning, and you kind of piece together the lore of this floating castle in the sky as you move along through like scraps of paper in offices, or there are some friendly characters in this castle as well that will give you little hints about what to do and why you're doing it, and as you play along, you kind of piece together the story. There's even like the corruption all over the walls and the floor, just like in Hollow Knight. Even the music itself is very similar to Hollow Knight with just soft percussions and maybe some light vocalizing. But overall, it might just be because you are playing this little tiny character that is silent and very quick with combat. I think it is pretty cool that all of the areas in this castle are interconnected. It just makes it feel like one whole cohesive piece compared to something like Super Mario 64 where you hop into the paintings and go into these different worlds. It's interesting to see how all of this stuff is interconnected. Not like exactly like a Metroidvania, but there are multiple pathways into multiple areas. So it's kind of cool to like, as you're progressing along, you'll come across like this locked gate that you can't get past, but then you move along to a different area and it feeds back to this locked gate where the switch is on the other side, so now you can easily use shortcuts to traverse across this castle. That being said, I think I would have really appreciated a map of this whole castle, and I understand this is a little more difficult to do in a 3D space, but it is actually pretty easy to get lost in a game like this because there isn't that much direction. You do have a quest track tracker for main quests and side quests, but I feel like as far as the tracking of these quests goes, it isn't that specific on where you need to go, and I did need to look a couple things up in order to progress into the game. And you are required to backtrack quite a lot, especially near the end of the game. So if you took a little bit of a break before you popped back into this game, you might forget how this whole castle is interconnected and just get lost, and it can actually be a little frustrating in that way. Now eventually you do unlock a fast travel between save points, so that makes things a little easier to keep track of and to get to where you're trying to go if you have explored it previously. As far as the game's direction goes, I feel like it is a little all over the place. Like, it is this whole open, interconnected 3D area in a castle, but there are a couple different segments that are more like dungeons, and they are kind of Zelda-esque in a way, but there are really only like 2 or 3 sections that are like this, where you go into this own secluded area and you have to get like the keys to progress into the doors, and you unlock this new traversal ability in order to help you progress through this dungeon further, and at the end there's a boss. And so I kind of thought that it would be going like this whole Zelda formula, like this overworld and then there are separate dungeons in between, but it really only did this 3 times before it went in a different direction. All that was more about exploring the whole castle and backtracking to areas that you've previously been through. There's even a part where you have to go find like these light vessels in every single area that you've already gone to, and you have to find all the little light spheres to fill it up. It very much reminded me of Twilight Princess with those light vessels whenever you are in that wolf form. There's equipment in this game, but nothing too stat heavy here. Basically, like, you can get different swords, and varying swords have varying attack power, but that's the only stat that you really have to manage. Now, there is some costume customization here, which I actually really appreciated, where you can get different colors for your cloak. And you can unlock these through side quests or exploration, or there's even a vendor that will sell these to you, which, you know, I think it's fun. I will appreciate any sort of unlockable customization in a game. I did mention side quests, and there is a decent amount of side quests. Now, this isn't a huge, ambitious game by any means, but I want to say there's maybe like 10 to 20 side quests that you could participate in, and I felt like I did most of these. And the awards vary from currency to the costumes that I mentioned to like different weapon unlocks, things like that. Oh, and there is one more thing that you can equip, and that being spirits, and these are just little passive effects. Like I said, I felt like most of this game focused on platforming rather than combat, so I would equip these spirits that would help me with platforming. Things like make it so I jump higher, or that when I walk off the ledge, I kind of hover above the ground. And as you progress and explore, you can find more of these spirits that you can equip to your character, and then you can unlock slots for more spirits as you play along. Things similar to like the badges or the pins or whatever in Hollow Knight, where they just give you little bonus effects. As you are exploring this castle, you might find these statues, and this was probably my favorite part of the game, me being like a really big platforming fan. And these are basically like secluded platforming challenges that are actually pretty difficult unless you have the right spirits equipped. And they vary from like pretty easy to actually really difficult, and they will be rated from 1 to 5 stars on their difficulty before you enter in these challenges. And if you clear the challenge, then you unlock like 1 extra heart equivalent for Zelda, so basically like 1 extra hit point. And maybe this is another reason why I thought that the combat itself was pretty manageable, because every time I found one of these void challenges, I would make sure to do it, so I had plenty of health by the end of the game. This is another fun little customization thing. If you progress through the game, you might find these other statues scattered throughout the world, and if you pay a small amount of currency, you unlock this little emote that your little character can do. And there are certain platforms hidden throughout the world that if you have the corresponding emote, then they will give you a certain item. Visually, it has this cool cel-shaded look that reminded me very much of The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. I feel like I'm bringing in all these external examples to help describe this game, and I feel like this is a pretty good summarization of what this game is. It's just like they had a whiteboard and they said, okay, what do we want for our game? And they just thought of all these other good game mechanics in other games and collided them all into one. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's good to borrow good ideas from other games. I just felt like they didn't do anything like super super original themselves, but they definitely made a pretty fun game because they took all of these other cool mechanics and just mishmashed it all into one. Another thing that I feel like I'm saying less and less whenever I do these casual reviews, it actually runs really great, and I didn't have any problems playing this on the Nintendo Switch. Maybe I noticed like a couple different spots where it got a little hiccupy when there was a ton of stuff going on the screen, but other than that, like, no game crashes, nothing like that. Maybe there was like one occasion where I fell through the ground and I just kind of hovered and died, but as far as like falling off the ledge or anything like that, it's pretty generous with this checkpoint, so this wasn't anything devastating. Like I said, this is a shorter game, so I don't have like a ton of stuff to talk about. It took me maybe 8 hours to beat, and my save file said that I had about 80% of the content completed, so I imagine that there is actually a decent amount of side stuff that I could still play through. But as far as the main quest, as far as like the main story, I wish there was just a little more meat to it. You know, it just kind of felt like it ended abruptly. It's just like, okay, explore the castle one last time to do these last objectives, find these last mini bosses, and then fight the last boss, and then you're done. And I just wish there was like maybe a little more narrative, just like a little more substance. But you might take that as a good sign of me wishing that there was just a little more content for me to play through. If it was a bad game, I obviously would not be wishing for that. Overall, I actually had a pretty decent time playing through this game. That might just be in part that it is a good controlling, good feeling 3D platformer, and I'm a sucker for platformers, so obviously it jived a lot with me, and the customization and everything, I just felt like it was a pretty decent package. I think I will give this game the score of 4 out of 5. There's a couple things that I would change, but overall, it's a great game, I think. And it's definitely worth a playthrough if you are a big fan of 3D platformers. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Blue Fire, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!